Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
It always seemed like getting to the top took longer than it should. It was hard to tell if the guys were looking forward to a night off or just annoyed about losing 2 hours of work. 2 hours into a 12-hour shift, the methane alarm went off. I still had the 4 sticks and their caps tucked in the yellow bag slung over my shoulder. There wouldn't be any blasting tonight, which meant I was stuck lugging the bag around again. The magazine, where the dynamite was kept locked up, only stayed open long enough for the dogwatch crew to check out their daily supply. Once again, I'd be taking the yellow satchel home with me. It was a hassle, sure, but the extra pay made up for it. I grabbed my Carhartt from the locker and headed out. Gray clouds were rolling in over the eastern mountains, and by the time I crossed the parking lot, Randy had the truck warmed up and ready to go. Damn it, Caleb. Why can't you just get yourself an old beater so you'd at least have something to drive? You know I can't afford it, I said. Just keeping up with the payments on Linda's Camaro has me scraping by. Feeding 3 kids and dealing with a high-maintenance wife isn't cheap. You're the most whipped guy I know, Randy shot back. She's been running your life since grade school. He wasn't wrong. Linda had latched onto me when we were kids. She was bossy and demanding, but also the prettiest girl in the county. I put up with her antics just to be close to her. Somewhere along the way, though, things got out of hand. We were barely out of the lot when the rain started coming down steady. A dark, cold rain that looked like it would last all night. The only good thing about the rain, as far as I was concerned, was that it washed away the coal dust that clung to everything. Farmers didn't see it that way, of course. The wipers on Randy's old F-100 slapped rhythmically against the windshield, leaving streaks in their wake. The crack on the passenger side, like always, was dripping water onto the dash. Great. Just what I needed, a beat-up old truck of my own. It was only a 15-minute drive to the trailer park, but the place turned into a swamp every time it rained. You'd think they'd lay down some gravel now and then, but that was wishful thinking. All we needed was a down payment to get out of there, but every time I managed to save a little, Linda found something else to spend it on. I'll pick you up tomorrow, same time, Randy said as we pulled up. Thanks, Randy. We'd grown up together. Neither of us ever planning to end up in the mines, but here we were. He'd wanted to join the Air Force, but they wouldn't take him without a high school diploma. I'd planned to be a certified auto mechanic, but that dream didn't pan out either. Hey, Caleb, where's the Camaro? Randy asked. The bright yellow car was hard to miss, except when it wasn't there. I just shrugged and headed toward the double-wide as Randy drove off. Inside, my 3 boys were sitting cross-legged on the floor, glued to the TV. Where's your mother? I asked. Jason, my 8-year-old, glanced up at me and shrugged. When did she leave? About 10 minutes after you left for work, Jason said, barely glancing away from the TV. I could tell I was interfering with their cartoon-watching marathon. What was she wearing? Her red dress. That told me plenty. Linda didn't put on that dress for a grocery run. It was low-cut, short, and clung to her in all the right places. I couldn't deny she looked incredible in it, but I knew better than to think she was just out running errands. I slid my crib can into the refrigerator. It would still be good tomorrow, and turned back to Jason. Did your mom feed you before she left? Jason, the only one paying me any attention, shook his head. No, I made dinner. What did you eat? Cocoa Puffs. The 3 of them were glued to the TV, barely acknowledging me. I could see that my questions were an unwelcome interruption. Jason might have been resourceful, but at 8, he wasn't old enough to be watching himself, let alone his brothers. Terry was 6, and Dylan, at nearly 3, still needed plenty of help. Jason, I said, when you get a chance, put some clean pants on Dylan. Looks like he peed himself again. I didn't understand why Dylan wasn't potty trained yet, but Linda had always been the type to let the kids figure things out for themselves, or not. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and took a quick leak. Outside, the rain was pounding harder than ever, but I felt a growing urge to go find Linda. Where was she tonight? Things had started going sideways about 4 years ago. That was when Linda began going out with her friend, Betty Ann. At first, it was just once a week, and I stayed home with the boys. She slowed down a bit when she was pregnant with Dylan, but once he was born, the outings picked up again. When I switched to the night shift at the mine, Linda hired sitters to watch the kids while she went out. Then, about 6 months ago, she stopped bothering with sitters altogether. Randy was right about one thing. I let Linda run the show. From the beginning of our relationship, she was the one calling the shots. She decided where we went, what we did, and how we lived. I never had much of a say in anything. Linda was so exciting, so magnetic, that I'd put up with almost anything just to keep her happy. That was my problem. I prioritized her happiness over everything else. If I'm being honest, the best part of our relationship was the sex. I had more of it and better than any guy I knew. But that wasn't enough to make up for everything else. I did try, at least once, to put my foot down about her going out all the time, but it was a disaster. Linda's dad was a deputy sheriff when we got married, and not long after, he was elected county sheriff. From the start, he didn't like me and made it clear he thought I wasn't good enough for his only daughter. Looking back, I realize he was right. I couldn't give Linda the kind of life she wanted. One night, before she got pregnant with Dylan, I went to a honky-tonk to drag her home. I didn't go quietly about it either. Her father showed up in less than 10 minutes, furious. He was a big man with a temper to match. In front of a packed bar, he slammed me against the wall and warned me that if I ever laid a hand on his daughter, he'd beat the living hell out of me. Linda managed to calm him down, and she did leave with me that night. But after that, I gave up trying to confront her about her nights out. Once Dylan was born, it felt like she kept going out just to spite me. There's a quote I've heard: "All men live lives of quiet desperation." I don't know who said it, but they were onto something. I looked at my 3 boys sprawled on the floor and felt something shift inside me. I didn't want to keep living like this. Outside, the rain still came down in heavy sheets. I grabbed the phone and called my mother. "Mama, it's Caleb. I need you to do me a favor." Mama and I had always been close, except when it came to Linda. She never warmed to my wife. Linda was smart and beautiful, but Mama always said she was sneaky and couldn't be trusted. Looks like she was right. Everyone was right about Linda, except me. "Why aren't you at work, boy? How do you expect to feed those 3 young uns if you're taking time off?" I didn't take off. The mine shut down because of the bottom gas again. "I need you and Dad to come over and pick up the kids. I've got to go out for a while, and I don't want to leave them here alone." "Where's that wife of yours?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I'm not sure." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she spoke again. "You do what you have to do, son. You know your daddy, and I will always back you up." "Thanks, Mama." Sometimes, it was good to have family. Linda had a cell phone, but I decided not to call her. I already knew it wouldn't do any good. The boys were still glued to the television as I slipped on my Carhartt and grabbed the yellow satchel. I pulled an old army surplus poncho over my head, bracing myself for the cold rain outside. They didn't even glance my way as I stepped out the door. Walking through the mud, I couldn't help but wish I had that beat-up truck Randy teased me about earlier. At least it'd get me out of here faster. It was less than half a mile from the trailer park to Main Street, but it felt like a lot longer in the pouring rain. Once I hit the asphalt, walking got a little easier, though the rain quickly wore me down. The poncho kept my upper body mostly dry, but it only reached my knees, and my Levi's were soaked within 10 minutes. For some reason, my left sock was already wet, a reminder that I needed to waterproof my boots again whenever I found the time. The ponchos had kept the rain off my head, but the wind blew it straight into my face. Every few minutes, I had to wipe my eyes just to see where I was going. Most of the bars were on the far side of town, naturally. This was an odd little place, split by the main street. On one side of the road ran the railroad tracks, and on the other were all the storefronts. Most of the stores were closed now, those that hadn't gone out of business already. The streetlights worked fine, though, and I could see the raindrops glistening as they fell past the glowing bulbs. A couple of cars slowed down to offer me a ride, but I waved them on. I wasn't in the mood for company or explanations. The south end of town stopped just short of the interstate. The last place still open there was Joe's Truck Stop. It used to be Joe's coffee shop before the interstate came through. They still served solid meals and hot coffee, and the truckers liked it for the cheap diesel, always a few cents less than the bigger stops. Between where I was and Joe's, there were at least a dozen bars and half as many motels. I figured Linda wouldn't want to drive too far on a night like this, so I had a decent chance of spotting her car somewhere along the way. All I needed to do was find that yellow Camaro. Too bad I couldn't afford a taxi. It would have made this miserable search a whole lot quicker. The rain just wouldn't let up. The thunder seemed to be fading, but the downpour persisted. The first 3 bars I checked were small, depressing places where mostly older folks nursed the same glass for hours. Not the kind of spot Linda would typically go, but I figured I might as well check them. I stood outside, peering through the windows. The real action was further down the road, where the neon lights flickered in the damp air. By now, my left foot was thoroughly soaked and starting to feel cold. I kept moving, scanning the parked cars carefully. Everything seemed to blend into shades of gray until I got within about 100 feet. I guess it was just another trick of the rain, something I hadn't noticed before. The roundabout was always the liveliest place in town. When Linda and I went out, we always ended up there. After several more dead ends, I finally made it. The place was big enough that I couldn't avoid walking in. I stood at the end of the bar, drenched and looking like a sorry mess. Damn, Caleb. You look like hell. What the hell are you doing out here on a night like this? Walt, the bartender and owner of the roundabout, came over with a grin and handed me a dry bar towel. Stay put, Caleb. I don't want to have to clean up after you, too. I wiped my face with the towel and ran it through my hair. Even with the hood of the poncho pulled up, my hair was drenched. When I handed the towel back to Walt, he gave me a short drink in exchange. I glanced around the room, taking in the crowd. Among the sea of people, I spotted Betty Ann. She was with two guys, but clearly seemed alone. She left about 20 minutes ago, Caleb, Walt said. I passed him the empty glass, giving him a nod to show I heard and understood. She was with Howard Garrett. He usually parks in the rear lot at the Whispering Pines, he added. I pulled the poncho hood back over my head, nodded again to Walt, and stepped out into the night. The rain had slowed, though it still lingered. The lightning was far off to the west, and the thunder had almost faded. It was only about a 10-minute walk to the Whispering Pines. My left foot was still bothering me, so I found myself shaking it every 100 feet or so. When I arrived, the yellow Camaro was parked next to Howard's large dual-wheel pickup. The back parking lot was dark. Guess that was no accident. I wasn't there for long, about 5 minutes. I was good at my job and took pride in my work. The walk back to the roundabout was quicker, as the rain had reduced to a light drizzle. I slipped off the poncho before heading back inside. It was clear that Walt didn't know how to approach me or what to say. He was a good guy, and I could tell he didn't want to be the one delivering bad news. He had no clue what I was up to, and that was fine with me. I offered him a small smile to reassure him, trying to ease the tension, and then asked him to have the waitress bring Betty Ann over. Betty Ann's voice dripped with sarcasm as she approached. What's up, Caleb? Why the hell aren't you at work? It took everything I had not to lash out. The urge to slap her was almost overwhelming. I kept my cool, instead asking, where is she, Betty Ann? Where the hell is Linda? And don't feed me any bullshit. She shot back, well, I guess she's home with your kids. Isn't that where she's supposed to be? Maybe you should get your butt back there and handle your business. Walt, sensing the tension, slid a beer toward me, probably trying to diffuse the situation. I took a long drink, feeling the cold liquid settle in my stomach, then leaned in toward Betty Ann. I'm going to find her, I said, my voice low but steady. And I'm going to kill her and any man she's with. Do you understand? The cocky arrogance in Betty Ann's demeanor vanished immediately. She seemed genuinely taken aback, and that impressed me. My words were far from my usual self, but something about this moment made me break from my usual calm. Walt, too, looked stunned, but I noticed a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I asked if you understand. I repeated, my tone firmer. Betty Ann nodded, but the words didn't come. She was usually quick with her comebacks, but not this time. As she walked back to her table, she glanced at me twice, her eyes wide. I handed Walt the empty glass, and he surprised me by offering his hand to shake before I left. That was something he'd never done before. Across the room, Betty Ann was already on her phone, talking rapidly. I grabbed the poncho from outside the door and tossed it, along with the empty yellow bag, into the dumpster by the bar. I wasn't trying to cover my tracks. I had no intention of sticking around. The mine would likely catch hell for the missing dynamite, but I wasn't going back there, either. I figured I had about 10 minutes to reach the truck stop if I hurried. Joe's was as busy as usual. The asphalt was still slick from the rain, but thankfully, it had stopped. I had to talk to 3 truck drivers before one finally agreed to give me a ride. Houston sounded good. Just as we hit the ramp to the interstate, there was a loud explosion about a quarter of a mile away. We saw the orange fireball and black smoke rise up, even in the dark. My driver muttered something, but I didn't catch it. He didn't notice the smile on my face as I stared out the window. I had no trouble landing a job at the Posta de Conchos mine near Palau. They were glad to get a certified shot fired after losing several men. Apparently, my credentials helped them meet some insurance requirements. As for the yellow Camaro, it vanished along with my wife. They held a memorial service, but there was no casket. Howard was blown across the parking lot by the blast, ending up splattered on the side of a dumpster. I felt bad for Howard, but at least he had a funeral. I don't think I'll be able to go back home, considering there's no statute of limitations for what I've done. Since blasting is a federal offense, the ATF is also looking for me. My mom and dad are bringing the boys down this summer. At least I don't have to wonder anymore. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.